And I did see my next guest walk into the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center here at Go Local. It's NAACP President of the Providence Branch, Jim Vincent here. Thank you for coming in today.
Well, thank you, Kate. It's
I
been a while.
appreciate it. Yes, but
Yeah.
big news here this week.
Yes.
The governor's appointment of Melissa Long to Superior Court.
Yes. Well, Governor Raimondo told me when she became governor that you send me qualified candidates of color and I'll put them on the bench. And she has basically done what she said she was going to do. Last year, called Rossi Harris in the family court, and now Melissa Long for the Superior Court. So she said that she would do that, and she has done that.
How many conversations did you have with her about this, would you say?
I'd say at least a half a dozen, maybe more than that. But I think all along I felt good about it, and I felt that it was a win-win-win. I thought it'd be good for the governor, I thought it'd be good for Melissa, and it's definitely good for the community.
Because I've got the release here. She's the only woman of color who's now in the Rhode Island judiciary, and only the second woman of color ever appointed as a judge in the Rhode Island judiciary. Now, we've written about this issue before. Talk to its importance.
Well, I mean, the fact that she's the only woman of color in the entire judiciary, I mean, how many courts do we have? We have Supreme Court, Superior, District Courts, Family Court, Workman's Comp, Traffic Tribunal. She's the only judge or magistrate in the entire judiciary. I mean, we have a very diverse state. That speaks volumes in terms of what we need to do in the future to make people feel comfortable in that they have a representative government. And she's only the second in the history of Rhode Island. Roger E. Thompson was the first, and of course now we know that she's with the U.S. Court of Appeals in Boston. So, I think that Melissa Long is going to have a really great career, and who knows, maybe she'll be the first person of color ever to be on the Rhode Island Supreme Court. But I guess I should wait. She gets in the Superior Court, plus I'm talking about the Supreme Court.
Looking at them, I don't want to necessarily get ahead of your skis, but
No.
as I said, we've talked about this before and the importance of it.
Yep.
And of course, you've heard sort of feedback from people before as, why does race or why does origin have to play a role in this? We've seen comments that have come back, well, shouldn't they be the most qualified? She's quite highly qualified.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, why shouldn't the most qualified or a person that's equally qualified have it? More often in history, when people start talking about race, they always assume that the person is less qualified. More often than not, it's the person that's more qualified, the person of color who does not get the job. That's been my experience. So here's a person that was equally or more qualified than all the other candidates, getting the job and filling a void. I mean, we have very few women in the judiciary, relatively speaking. No women of color, and now only the third person of color, because there are only two men of color that are active in the entire court system, and that's Rossi Harris and Bill Clifton in the district court.
And how important, and you mentioned again, Rhode Island, the diversity that we know is here. How important is it reflected in the judiciary system for folks possibly going through the judiciary system?
Well, I mean, I don't know the numbers in terms of who faces the judiciary, but I know that in the state is roughly 25% people of color, so that's a benchmark. Mm-hmm. So when you have, one here, one there, zero here, zero there, it's not representative at all. So it's a matter of restoring confidence in terms of an institution that is important. I think we all agree that the judiciary in any state is important. And we have to have people feeling that they can get a fair shake, or that there's a fairness in terms of the selection process. It's just good all the way around.
Well, I appreciate your coming in to talk about this specific issue, and now we know this is the News and Politics Hour. So you said you've had conversations with the governor about this.
Yes.
What's on your plate for things moving forward in terms of addressing issues in the state?
Well, there are 6 justice reinvestment bills that are now presently before the legislature. Mm-hmm. I would like the House to vote and approve all 6. They basically deal with probation and parole reform, so that's important. I'd like to see an upvote in terms of automatic voter registration at the registry and other places. So those things are near and dear to my heart. And there's several others, but in terms of a priority of the NAACP, I think those would probably be the top priorities.
What do you think the chances are in the House? We saw it happen on the Senate last year. Again, they approved it, and the House let it languish. Priority of many folks up there. Yeah. What do you think the prospects are this year?
Well, I think they're good. I'm not quite sure what happened last year, but last year. I think this year is a year where I think there's some focus on probation and parole. So I'm looking forward to the House approving all 6 bills. I'm optimistic. I realize that, but I think it's good for the state. It's good for everybody. So I'd like to see that in anything involving voting, so that automatic voter registration, and also early voting. If we could somehow get early voting passed, that'd be great for our state as well.
And one of the big issues this year that came to a head is legalization of marijuana.
Mhm.
And the last thing that we saw out of Regulate RI, of which you are a chair,
Mhm.
again, you've been a very strong proponent for the legalization of marijuana,
Mhm.
a reticence to have folks from Regulate RI take part in the study commission because, as we heard from Regulate RI, don't think it's a very fair or reflective study commission. Do you think that you'd participate, or someone will participate from Regulate RI if this is what ends up being the case?
I don't think it's the component of who's on the study commission. I think it's the whole idea of the fact that we've been studying this issue for the last several years. So now it's time for a vote, either up or down. That's why I'm not participating. I would like to see a vote, up or down. I see the legalization of marijuana as a social justice issue. Too many people in my community, and we have the statistics that 3 times more blacks than whites are arrested for marijuana, despite the fact that usage is the same, or maybe even the usage is slightly higher in the white community. That has consequences in terms of a person not being able to get a job, a person not being able to get housing, or get a school loan if they get a record. So there's barriers enough in terms of getting those things. Having marijuana be another barrier to having a community that's viable is something that's really important in terms of the NAACP. So that's why we support that legislation.
Do you have concerns, here we are in 2017, if in 2018 being an election year, it ends up being a politically unfeasible, again, issue and doesn't see a vote again? I mean, do you think that 18 could happen, or do you think that, again, there might be reticence because it's an election year?
Well, I mean, I think some of it has to do with, will have to do with how it goes in Massachusetts, and the amount of money we're losing to Massachusetts, the state of the Rhode Island economy in terms of the money that we might need to plug in some gaps. I know that the speaker talks about, the car tax, and then there's also the governor's well thought out, I think, Rhode Island promise, because I think that we need to expand opportunities for people to get the kind of jobs that require college educations today. I think that's all going to cost money, and as you know, with the regulation of marijuana, there would be untold amount of money coming into the state that could be used on those things.
Absolutely. Any other issues at the Assembly or at the statewide that you want to talk while you're here in the studio?
Well, I think that I'd like to use the time to hammer home again that the justice reinvestment bills are really important to the NAACP, and we'd like to see all 6 of those probation and parole reform bills passed. And also voting. I'd like to see automatic voting registration passed. We'd also like serious consideration on early voting. So I'd like to use my time to hammer home those points because those are really important in terms of the NAACP.
Now, I'm just going to toss out the wild card here. I mean, it might be just asking Jim Vincent, as Jim Vincent, not the head of the NAACP. Okay. What are your thoughts on the Paw Sox and the new proposal to have a stadium built in Pawtucket?
Well, I mean, it's complicated. I like baseball, I like the Paw Sox and all of that, but it's like anything else. I hope that a deal can get done some kind of way. I'm not sure exactly how it can get done, but at the end of the day, if the Paw Sox can get a stadium, I think that'll be good for everybody.
Well, we're going to be keeping an eye on it. Again, the last we heard as the speaker was looking at a fall session. Again, we have to see how things move forward up at the Assembly. It is fast and furious. Are you heading up there right now?
Not really, but you never know. Might
Never
get a call.
Never know if you get called up. But again, wanted you in specifically, again, because this is, again, Melissa Long's appointment by the governor. Has to go through Senate confirmation.
Yes.
But it sounds like the vetting process had happened. Do you think that there's enough persons of color in the pipeline for consideration here in the state?
There's never enough, but I think that now with the appointment of Rossi Harris to the family court, now Melissa Long to the Superior Court, I think there's going to be more of a belief that, yes, I can be appointed as well. I think there was a lot of people that were reluctant in the past because they felt they didn't have a shot. I don't think it's so much not having enough candidates in the pipeline. There always could be more, but I think the bigger question was if those candidates that were qualified, whether or not they would get that fair shot. And I think now with those appointments that Governor Raimondo, who promised he would do, have done, I think you're going to see more candidates applying.
Okay, well, Jim Vincent with the NAACP, I appreciate you coming back in the studio today to talk about this, about Melissa Long. Again, her appointment to Superior Court. As you said, keeping an eye of Supreme Court might be on the horizon someday.
You never know.
You never know. Oh, the fist bump.
That's right.
That's what Russ Moore does on Fridays, for on or not. He's always fist bumping high five. I can never keep track of what he's up to. Again, Jim Vincent with the NAACP, they put out a statement in support, again, this is of Melissa Long being appointed to Superior Court. Now, this is by Governor Raimondo. And again, just want to give you some statistics. Long would be the only woman of color currently to be on the Rhode Island judiciary, and only the second woman of color ever appointed to the judiciary here in Rhode Island. So wanted to bring him in. It was an issue that we've written about in the past. I've spoken with him and other leaders in the state So we saw that happen this week and wanted him in here in the studio to talk a little bit more